A massive object has crashed into the ice near the North Pole. A United States Air Force team is sent to investigate with the help of a nearby outpost of scientists, and they find what they can scarcely believe, the frozen wreckage of a flying saucer. Though they are unable to secure the craft, they do recover one of its alien inhabitants. Preserved in a giant block of ice, they take the thing back to the polar outpost, where Captain Pat Hendry determines to keep it frozen and await further instructions from his superiors, much to the vocal disapproval of lead scientist Dr. Arthur Carrington. When the thing is accidentally thawed out and escapes, this disagreement becomes a matter of life and death, with Captain Hendry leading the charge to destroy the monster, and Dr. Carrington resolved to keep it alive for study and intellectual exchange, even as the thing begins killing everyone in its path. In 1950, legendary film director Howard Hawks set out to produce a science fiction thriller loosely based on Joseph Campbell's famous short story Who Goes There? He envisioned it as a B-movie made with A-list sensibilities, and he had several of his longtime collaborators put it together, including the screenwriting team of Charles Lederer and Ben Hecht. With editor Christian Nyby in the director's chair, a talented cast of theater actors and virtual unknowns was assembled. For the lead role of Captain Pat Hendry, they brought on Kenneth Tobey, a hard-working character actor inexperienced at the time, who would go on to have over 200 credits to his name, including a starring role in another creature feature, It Came From Beneath the Sea. For the antagonist, Dr. Carrington, they hired Robert Cornthwaite, a theater actor who would go on to appear in several genre films and TV shows like The War of the Worlds and Get Smart. The plucky reporter Ned Scott was played by Douglas Spencer, another prolific character actor who would have notable roles in films like Shane, The Diary of Anne Frank, and of course This Island Earth, in which he played the big-headed, blue-skinned alien leader, the Monitor. For the female lead of Nikki, they cast Margaret Sheridan, a model without a single credit to her name at the time. Sheridan would go on to have a handful of minor movie and television roles in things like I, the Jury, and Wagon Train, but she would eventually quit acting to become a real estate agent, which is surprising as she gives perhaps the best performance in the whole movie. Finally, there is the thing itself, and they needed someone large and imposing to put in its enormous shoes. James Arness signed on, and though he would later consider this to be one of his worst roles, no doubt made all the worse when almost all of his close-ups were cut from the film due to unsatisfactory makeup, it was the launching point for a very successful career, culminating in his lead role in Gunsmoke, which ran for 20 years and over 600 episodes. The movie was given an A-list budget of $1.3 million, increasing to $1.6 with reshoots and other production add-ons, and that was enough to allow for a few location shoots at Glacier National Park, which does a convincing job standing in for the Arctic wasteland of the North Pole. The budget also gave the filmmakers license to attempt one of the biggest stunts of the time, a full-body burn, which had never been done before. It was definitely worth it, too, as the burn scene is probably the film's most memorable and exciting sequence. Surprisingly, the thing was made by people largely inexperienced in the realm of science fiction. Hawks himself was known for crime thrillers, comedies, and westerns, and before The Thing, he'd never even dabbled in science fiction. The same goes for his screenwriting team and director. Prior to the early 50s, science fiction was seen as a niche genre in Hollywood, reserved exclusively for schlocky B-movies. Hawks, despite this being the only science fiction film in his entire filmography, helped to change all that with The Thing. When combined with 1951's other sci-fi hits When Worlds Collide and The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Thing started a massive sci-fi boom that would continue well into the following decade. It's also often credited as the first science fiction creature feature, though that honor clearly belongs to Frankenstein. Regardless, The Thing set the stage for great 1950s sci-fi creature features like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Them, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. It proved that science fiction and horror were natural bedfellows and could be extremely profitable, both financially and critically, when well made. As for what it means on a cultural level, the answer to that is a bit more complicated. On the surface, this film is the thematic counterpoint to The Day the Earth Stood Still. The Thing from Another World feels more pro-military, more skeptical of science, and more paranoid about things outside our understanding. The alien in The Thing is malevolent and brutal, and the scientist who tries to reason with it and learn from it, Dr. Carrington, is portrayed in as negative a light as possible, as foolish and conniving. The hero, Captain Hendry, equates the Doctor's scientific curiosity to a child playing with a new toy, and he, Hendry, is portrayed as noble and wise and seeking to eradicate the Thing as quickly as possible. You can read a lot into this and look at the themes of the film in a number of ways. It could be an anti-intellectual hit piece against the science that had just given the world the atomic bomb, or it could be a patriotic pro-military film that instills faith in our armed forces. It could be a nuclear panic flick, the thing is radioactive after all, or it could even be a Red Scare movie if you swap out the thing for communism. However, all of these interpretations are in one degree or another problematic. For example, while the film is clearly interested in showing the US military in a positive light, two of the story's biggest blunders, the accidental destruction of the alien craft and the idiotic way the thing is thought out, are caused by military decisions. Also, it's worth noting that during the climax, Captain Hendry is going explicitly against orders from his superior, the Brigadier General, who has unambiguously told him to keep the thing alive. Carrington, as a secondary villain, isn't as clear-cut as he may appear either. He is certainly drawn as an unlikable character the audience is supposed to root against, with his arrogant, aloof demeanor and a look that is deliberately designed to invoke Russian fear, but at the same time he's not entirely wrong, especially during the film's first half. The conflict between Carrington and Hendry is, at its heart, a logical one, drawn out of a rational disagreement, and even though the film tries to stack the deck in favor of Hendry, Carrington's not an irredeemable figure. The female lead, Nikki, even goes so far as to defend him on multiple occasions, arguing that stress and exhaustion have pushed him into behaving more erratically than he otherwise would. This highlights perhaps the thing's strongest element, its characters. Sci-fi creature features aren't usually renowned for having well-crafted multi-dimensional characters, but The Thing from Another World is populated by men and women who defy archetype. Carrington's positive qualities are just one example. You can also point to Captain Hendry as a flawed hero, a trigger-happy womanizer who tries for most of the movie to delegate responsibility for what he must do. The latest subject of his womanizing, Nikki Nicholson, Carrington's secretary, is perhaps the most interesting and well-rounded character in the whole movie, a woman unafraid to take charge and call Hendry out for his bad behavior while simultaneously encouraging and delighting in it. While she's still the girl walking around making sure the men all have coffee, she's a remarkably independent woman, far more progressive and human than most Hollywood stereotypes of the time. And her relationship with Hendry is organic and believable in a way that Hollywood romances usually aren't. These believable, human interactions are some of the main reasons it feels like The Thing from Another World was not only produced, but also directed by Howard Hawks. It has all the hallmarks of a Hawks film, especially snappy, overlapping dialogue and a well-worn sense of camaraderie between the characters. It is no surprise that rumors would persist that the film was, in fact, directed by Hawks instead of Christian Nyby, who received the credit. Indeed, this marks Nyby's first and easily best directorial effort, with his subsequent career marked by a respectable but relatively mediocre run of TV shows, most notably several episodes of Perry Mason and Rawhide, and a handful of forgotten low-budget flicks like Young Fury and Operation CIA. Adding fuel to the gossip is none other than lead actor Kenneth Tobey, who has been quoted as saying that Hawks was the director, not Nyby. Reports vary, though, and while some of the cast and crew agree with Tobey that Hawks was the primary director, others say the film was Nyby's show from the get-go. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as all seem to agree that Hawks was always present and that Nyby, at the very least, went to him for constant advice and coaching. Nyby was a longtime friend and collaborator of Hawks, and as this was his first time directing, he might have simply deferred to the man's experience while trying to imitate his style. The Thing from Another World debuted in April of 1951 and earned a domestic box office of slightly under $2 million, making it the most profitable science fiction film of the year, despite some stiff competition. It was also critically lauded as a shining example of what science fiction could achieve, and that went a long way to giving a shine of credibility to a genre that desperately needed it. At the end of the day, and regardless of who really directed it, The Thing from Another World launched over a decade of science fiction creature features. Hawks succeeded in making a B-movie on an A-list budget, and that's all the film is when you get right down to it. It has some thematic depth and interesting ideas, but it isn't trying to do much more than thrill and entertain. On that score, it is a resounding success. And that's all for today, fellow Earthlings. If you like what I'm doing here, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This is the first video voted on by my patrons, and if you'd like to have a say on what movies I'll tackle in the future, head on over to Patreon where you can get early access to my latest videos and much more. You can also go to my website at emcgill.com where you'll find written reviews of several science fiction classics, including reviews for The Thing from Another World, John Carpenter's excellent remake, the subsequent not-so-excellent prequel, and even Joseph Campbell's original short story, Who Goes There? There are links to all of these reviews in the description. I do intend to cover the John Carpenter film in my next video, but until then, this is The Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
women. What a woman wants is to... How long have you been loose?
Long enough.